Marshall is not known for going small. They've produced some of the rockinest amps both sides of the pond. However, between the rise of modelers and pint-sized bedroom amps, modern players want smaller rigs, but they still love sweet, sweet vintage tones. So, what does Marshall do? They created 5 overdrive pedals to replicate the chest-thumping goodness of their most iconic amps. You have the 1959, JCM 800, JCM 900, Dual Super Lead, and JVM. Keep in mind, these are drive pedals, not emulators. BYOS, which stands for Bring Your Own Speaker. They're designed to work with your favorite amp and give it that amazing distortion that only a Marshall can provide. So, let's meet the crew. Age before beauty, this is the 1959. The 1959 is based on the one that started it all. It was the dawn of the 100-watt Super Lead Plexi. You've heard it, in every single classic rock album ever made. It's classic Kerrang! Think Jimmy Page with a little tease toward Van Halen. You have controls to adjust H treble, normal, tone, and volume. How the heck do you control normal? Well, the original 1959 featured 2 channels, high treble and normal treble, essentially giving you 2 gain stages to play with. These 2 controls are a throwback to the good old OG of high gain. Most of your thump will be in the normal channel, but with a couple of tweaks, you could easily find that gainy goodness you crave from a real deal Plexi. A few years later, players decided they wanted even more dirt than the 1959 could provide. Cue the JCM 800. The JCM 800 ushered in a new era of high gain, complete with master volume to really crank the sound. Rather than the high treble and normal treble settings, the JCM 800 pedal offers gain, sensitivity, tone, and volume controls. Although really, the sensitivity control just lets you blend the high and low gain stages you'd find on the original model. Yes, it can go crazy with the gain, but the 800 is surprisingly versatile, giving you some slightly crunchy cleans, all the way up to the ridiculous distortion you'd expect. A new amp for a new era. In 1990, Marshall released the JCM 900. It had even more gain and launched the channel switching craze that continues today. Of course, you can't channel switch a distortion pedal, but you can get ridiculous amounts of vintage-inspired tone with gain, contour, tone, and volume controls. Crank the gain, level it out with the contour, adjust the tone, set your volume, and you're ready to shred. The mid-range in the 900's a little different from other Marshall amps, and since this is a distortion pedal that's meant to be used with a real amp, the contour control lets you adjust your mid-range to suit your rig. That way, it always sounds good. In 1997, Marshall did something a little weird. They released an amp that didn't have more gain than their previous model. However, just because the Dual Super Lead didn't have quite as much gain, which sounds weird based on its model name, it provided a more balanced tone compared to the others. And of course, still plenty of gain. The DSL pedal is based on the early British models and features gain, deep, tone, and volume controls to dial in your sound. The deep control adjusts the amount of low end, making it easy to match your amp's tone. It's really a jack of all trades when it comes to tone crafting. And finally, the youngest of the batch is the JVM. The JVM might be the most recent amp in the Overdrive Pedals Series, even though it's still over 25 years old. But that doesn't mean it's any less legendary. In short, it spawned the modern multi-channel revolution, which made the JVM incredibly versatile for a ton of different genres. However, where it really shined was in the heavy ultra gain world. The Marshall JVM pedal has controls for volume, tone, gate, and gain. And with all that gain, you'll definitely want to play around with the noise gate. It works really well to cut unwanted hum without limiting your guitar's sustain too much. It's also great for staccato chugging. You can get some crunchy sounds with the JVM in the lower settings, but let's be real, with the noise gate, it's all about the gain. If you wanted to collect all of these Marshall amps for real, it'd cost more than they pay me to be in this video. But each one of these distortion pedals costs under $150. Crazy, I know. You could have the genuine distortion of a vintage Marshall amp on your pedal board for a fraction of what a real amp would cost. And these things are bricks. You can tell they're made to last. They also have top-mounted jacks, so you can really pack them onto your pedal board. They even can run on a 9-volt battery if the wireless life is what you're looking for. We've found that these work best with clean amps, but you can add them to just about any setup for all sorts of ridiculous, vintage-inspired distortion. Check out the Marshall Overdrive Pedals Series and add some British gain to your board right here at AmericanMusical.com.